I have fed monsters for 60 cycles of my life. I have cleaned the blood off cage floors that was not the monsters. I have written the names of dead keepers into the facility ledger with my own hand, one stroke at a time, and I have buried so many of them that the soil out past the loading docks is more bone than dirt now. I know what death smells like in the dark. I know the exact sound a body makes when something larger decides it is no longer a person. So believe me when I tell you this. One day a human walked into the dark of that place, and every beast we had went silent. Not afraid silent, not the silence of a cornered animal waiting to strike. It was a different kind of quiet, the kind a room makes when someone everyone respects finally walks in. I did not understand it then. I am not sure I understand it fully even now, but I was there. I saw it with both of my eyes. And I have decided that before I am too old to tell it straight, somebody should hear what really happened in that facility, and why I stopped carrying a prod, and why I will never again call a creature deadly just because it has teeth. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell it the way it happened. The facility had no proper name. People who came to buy from us called it the pit, though it was not really a pit, just a long sunken complex carved into a dead moon where nobody asked questions and nobody filed reports. We held the things other worlds did not want loose. The apex predators. The ones declared too dangerous to transport, too valuable to put down. Hunters paid for them. Private collectors paid more. And the arena syndicates, the ones who liked their blood sport ugly, they paid the most of all. My species are called the Threll. We are small and gray and quick, built for tunnels, which is how my ancestors ended up in this line of work. We fit through the maintenance shafts. We can move along the catwalks above a containment hall without making the floor shudder. The big species cannot do that. So for generations, my kind have been the keepers, the ones who walk among the worst things in the galaxy and live, mostly, to walk again the next morning. The way we survived was simple: fear. We taught fear and we lived on it. Every creature in that complex wore a neural collar. Every keeper carried a shock prod and a pain remote. From the day a beast arrived, we burned one lesson into it. You move wrong, you hurt. You lunge, you hurt worse. You exist, and the small gray things hold the power. We told ourselves it was the only way. A thing that could swallow you whole would not respect kindness. It would respect agony. That was the whole science of it. And I believed in that science the way you believe in gravity. The weather inside never changed. The dome kept it cold and damp always because the cold made the big ones sluggish and easier to handle. There was a constant drip of condensation off the high struts, a sound I heard in my sleep for decades. The light was the color of old bruises. And the smell. I cannot describe the smell to someone who has not lived in it. Wet stone, ozone from the collars, the iron tang of feeding, and under all of it, the deep musk of 100 frightened predators pressed too close together in the dark. That was my world. That was the place a human was about to walk into. We did not see many humans out there. Their kind were known by reputation as the soft species. No claws worth the name. No fangs. Skin you could open with a fingernail. They had spread across more of the galaxy than seemed reasonable for such fragile things, and there were whispers about why, but most of us put it down to luck and large numbers. Around the pit, when a human name came up, it came with a small laugh. A human handler. You might as well send in a serving tray with legs. So when the broker told us he had hired a new night keeper and she was human, we laughed too. The broker was the closest thing the facility had to an owner. A heavy, jowled creature of a species I will not bother naming, with too many fingers and a habit of counting them when he was nervous. He hired the human, he told us flatly, because she was cheap, and because the last 3 night keepers had quit, run off, or been carried out in pieces, and word had gotten around. No one wanted the night shift anymore. The night shift meant being alone with the worst of them, when the lights dropped to almost nothing. She came to me, the broker said, counting his fingers. Asked for the hardest post we had, didn't even argue the pay. He shrugged all of his shoulders. Soft species or not, a body that walks toward this work instead of away from it is rare, We'll see how long she lasts. She arrived on the supply hauler 3 days later. I remember being on the upper catwalk when the airlock cycled, looking down to get my first sight of her. She was smaller than I expected, smaller than most of her kind, slim, with dark hair tied back and skin the brown of riverbank clay. She wore a plain work jacket, scuffed at the elbows, and she carried one bag. That was all. One bag for a person planning to live underground with monsters. Her name was Cora Vance. The foreman met her at the dock and ran through the rules fast and bored, the way he did with everyone he expected to be gone within the month. Here is your prod. Here is your pain remote. Never open a gate without checking the collar feed. Never turn your back. Never ever let one of them get between you and the door. He held out the prod for her to take. She looked at it for a moment. Then she said in a quiet, even voice, "I don't think I'll need that." The foreman laughed. I laughed too up on the catwalk. The whole hall practically laughed. She did not take it personally. She just set the prod down on the rail gently, like she did not want to be rude about it, and she picked up her bag and she asked where the containment halls were. The foreman, still grinning, pointed her toward the worst one. Hall 3. We kept the apex specimens in Hall 3. He pointed her there as a joke, the way you might send a fool to fetch a tool that does not exist, expecting her to come scurrying back pale and shaking. She did not come back. I followed her, of course. We all did in our own ways. The catwalks above Hall 3 filled up with quiet gray shapes that night, every keeper on shift finding a reason to be near, because everyone wanted to watch the soft species get her education. There is an ugliness in people, my people included, that likes to watch a confident newcomer learn how small they really are. I am not proud of it, but I was up there with the rest. Hall 3 was where we kept the things that had killed keepers. There was the Wrenclaw at the far end, a hunched mountain of armored muscle from a high-gravity world, the one that had taken the arm and then the life of a keeper 2 cycles back. There was the pale, eyeless thing from the deep oceans of a drowned planet, all jaw and whip, that hunted by the vibration of a heartbeat and had to be kept behind sound baffles. There was the pack hunter with the second mouth in its throat. And in the largest enclosure, in the deepest shadow, there was the one we did not even have a proper name for. The black, six-limbed shape we just called the Quiet One, because the cycle it arrived at had killed 2 keepers in under a minute and had not made a single sound while doing it. Every one of them had a kill count. We tracked it. We bragged about it in the dark way keepers brag. The Quiet One had 4. Cora Vance walked into that hall alone, with no prod, carrying a feed bucket, and she did not go fast and she did not go slow. That was the first thing I noticed watching from above. She did not move like prey. Prey moves in jerks, freezing and bolting. And she did not move like us keepers either, all tense readiness, ready to flinch. She just walked, steady, like a person walking through her own home in the dark who knows where the furniture is. Her shoulders were down, her hands were open. And she was humming. I could barely hear it from the catwalk over the eternal drip of the water. A low, tuneless thing, no words, the kind of sound a person makes without thinking when they are calm and busy. It went up and down, soft, repeating, and it never stopped the whole time she walked the length of that hall. The Wrenclaw was the first. When a keeper approaches the Wrenclaw, it rises, always. It hauls that armored bulk up off the floor and presses against the front of its enclosure and shows you everything it would do to you if the barrier ever failed, and the smart keeper thumbs the pain remote at the first twitch, just to remind it. We had all done it. It was procedure. Cora did not have a remote. She came level with the enclosure, and the Wrenclaw rose the way it always did, that terrible slow lifting of a thing built like a siege weapon. I heard a keeper near me suck in a breath. This was the moment. This was where the soft species learned. And Cora stopped and turned and looked at it. She did not back away. She did not freeze. She looked at the Wrenclaw, this creature that had killed one of us, and her humming went on, low and even, and she tilted her head a little, The way you might if you were really seeing something for the first time and finding it interesting rather than terrifying. The Renclaw held there, reared up for a long moment. And then it lowered itself back down to the floor. Not in defeat. There was no pain involved, no remote, nothing to make it. It simply settled, slow, that great armored head sinking until it rested on its forelimbs, and its eyes stayed on her, and it went still. I had never seen it do that for anyone. Cora set down a portion of feed at the slot, said something to it too quiet to hear, and walked on, still humming. The Renclaw watched her go and did not rise again. I told myself it was a fluke, an old beast having a slow night. Up on the catwalk the muttering said the same. Fluke, coincidence, wait for the next one. The next one was the deep ocean thing behind the sound baffles, the eyeless hunter that struck at heartbeats. With that one we always moved on the outer walkway, never the inner, because if you got close it could feel the pulse in your body through the floor and the wall and the water in its tank, and it would throw itself at the barrier hard enough to crack the seals. Cora walked the inner walkway. We all leaned forward at once. Someone whispered her name like a warning, as if she could hear us, as if it would matter. The eyeless thing turned toward her. That blind, pale head swung around to face the wall she stood behind, locked onto the drum of her heart, and we all waited for it to charge. It drifted closer to the glass, and it stopped, and it hung there in the dark water, that whip of a body coiling slow, facing her, doing nothing, just feeling her heartbeat, and her heartbeat, whatever it was telling that creature, made it go calm. I have thought about this more than almost anything else in my life. A thing that hunted by fear, by the panicked hammering of a trapped pulse, and it pressed close to a human heart and found that heart beating slow and even and unafraid. And it settled, as if it had been waiting its whole captive life to feel a heartbeat that was not screaming. By the time she reached the quiet one, I was no longer breathing right. Part 2. The quiet one had 4 kills, and it had earned every one of them in silence. It lived in the largest enclosure at the deepest end of Hall 3, in a shadow we kept deliberately dark because light seemed to agitate it. We fed it through a double-gated chute, and none of us ever stood at the front of its barrier. There was an unspoken rule about that. You did your business with the quiet one quickly, from the side, with the prod charged and the remote in your free hand and your eyes never leaving it, and then you got out of Hall 3 and you breathed again somewhere else. In all my cycles I had looked the quiet one in the eyes exactly once, by accident, and I had not slept properly for a week after. Cora Vance walked straight up to the front of its barrier and stood there. The whole catwalk had gone dead silent. No more muttering, no more little laughs. 40 keepers crouched in the dark above, and not one of us made a sound, because we all understood we were about to watch a person die, and some part of every one of us did not want to, not really, not now that we had seen her walk that hall. The quiet one came out of its shadow. It unfolded. That is the only word for it. 6 limbs, that black shape that drank the light, rising and spreading until it filled the front of the enclosure, until it loomed over her small clay-brown figure, and it lowered that featureless head down toward the barrier until it was level with her face, a hand's breadth of dirty glass between her and the thing that had killed 4 of us. She stopped humming. For the first time since she had entered the hall, Cora Vance went quiet, and she stood there, and she looked up into the place where the quiet one's eyes should be, and the quiet one looked back down at her, and the two of them simply regarded each other in the dark while the water dripped from the struts. I want to tell you something. In 60 cycles I had never once thought of the quiet one as a person. It was a hazard, a force, a thing with a kill count. But watching it lower its head to meet her gaze, watching it hold so carefully still, so deliberately gentle with all that lethal mass, I felt something turn over inside me that has never fully turned back. It was being careful with her. It did not want to frighten her. This thing that frightened everything, this thing we had collared and shocked and starved compliant, was being careful, The way you are careful with something you have decided matters. Cora raised one hand, slow, and she pressed her open palm flat against the glass. And the quiet one raised one of its 6 limbs and pressed it to the glass from the other side, against her hand, that dark, impossible shape matching her small one point for point, and they stayed like that, and nobody on the catwalk breathed at all. Then she started humming again, soft, and she stepped back, and she set down its feed, and she walked out of Hall 3 the same steady way she had walked in. She did not look up. She did not know we were there. She just went to find her quarters, I suppose, and unpack her one bag, while above her 40 keepers sat in the dark trying to understand what we had just seen. That was the first night. There were many nights after. Word spread fast. By the end of the first week, every keeper in the facility had found an excuse to watch Cora Vance work her rounds, and every single one of them came away changed, or at least quieter. Because it was not a fluke, and it was not luck, and it was not one strange beast on one strange night. It was all of them. Every creature in that complex, the deadliest collection of predators anyone had ever assembled in one place, reacted to her the exact same way. They went calm. The pack hunter with the second mouth, the one that paced and snarled and threw itself at Gates, stopped packing when she passed and watched her with something that looked almost like longing. The high-gravity Renclaw started rising to greet her, not to threaten her, just to be near the barrier when she came. The eyeless ocean thing learned the rhythm of her shift and would be waiting against the inner glass before she even arrived, feeling for her down the long approach corridor by the slow, steady drum of her heart. And it was not that she had power over them. That was what we could not get our heads around, those of us who had spent our lives in this. We had power over them. We had collars and prods and remotes and the whole brutal science of fear. And our power made them hate us, made them dangerous, made them wait for the one mistake that would let them pay us back. Cora had no power over them at all. She could not have made any of them do anything. And they were calm for her, in a way they had never once been calm for us. The keepers split into 2 camps about it, the way people always do. Some of them got frightened. There is an old superstition among my kind about creatures that the beasts will not attack, and it is not a kind superstition. They started saying she was wrong somehow, tainted, that she smelled of death or of nothing, and that was why the predators left her alone, the way scavengers leave alone a thing already claimed. They wanted to be afraid of her because being afraid was easier than the other thing. The other thing was what the rest of us started to feel, and the other thing was shame. Because some of us, watching her, had begun to understand what we were actually looking at. We had spent generations telling ourselves these creatures were monsters, that they understood nothing but pain, that there was nothing in them to reach. And here was this soft, small, fragile human walking among them with open hands, reaching them with nothing but the simple fact of being unafraid and meaning them no harm, and they were responding. They had always had it in them to respond. We just had never offered them anything worth responding to. I started seeking her out. I will admit that. I am old and curious, and I had questions, and so one night I climbed down from the catwalks and I met Cora Vance properly in the feed prep room while she filled her buckets. She was not surprised to see a keeper come talk to her. She was not surprised by much I would learn. She just nodded at me, friendly, and went on with her work. I asked her the question all of us were asking. I asked her how she did it. She thought about it for a while before she answered. That was a thing about her. She did not fill silence with noise. When you asked Cora Vance something real, she would sit with it. I don't do anything, she said finally. That's the whole secret. If it's a secret, I don't do anything to them. She tipped a measure of feed into a bucket. Everybody who walks into these halls is doing something to them, threatening, dominating, managing. Even just being scared at them, that's doing something. They can smell it. It tells them you think they're a danger, and so they become one. She shrugged. I just walk through. I don't want anything from them. I'm not afraid of them, and I'm not trying to control them. I think maybe nobody's ever just been with them before, without an angle. They have killed keepers, I said. Some of these, The one at the end, the dark one, has killed 4. She looked at me then, and there was something sad in her face. I know, she said. I read the ledger. She set down the bucket. Can I ask you something? The 4 it killed, what were they doing when it killed them? I had to think. I knew the stories. Every keeper knew them. And as I told them to her one by one, I heard the thing she had already heard, the thing I had never let myself hear before. The first keeper had been resetting its collar after a shock cycle. The second had been driving it back from a gate with a charged prod. The third had cornered it during a transfer. The fourth had been the one who first put it in that enclosure, who collared it, who taught it the science of fear in the deep dark for the first time. Every keeper it had killed while in pain, or being driven, or being caged by them. It had never once killed a keeper who was simply present. It had never killed anyone who was not, at that moment, hurting it. It's not a murderer, Cora said quietly. It's a prisoner that fought back. There's a difference. The whole galaxy decided these things were deadly. Nobody asked deadly to who. I did not have an answer for that. I have spent the cycle since trying to find one, and I have not. We talked many times after that, Cora and I. She told me where she came from, a little. She had grown up around animals, on a human world, working with creatures that frightened other people. She said humans had a long history with that, with the frightening ones, with wolves and great cats and worse, and that somewhere far back her kind had learned the one thing that mattered, which was that the line between a monster and a companion was almost never about the creature. It was about whether anyone had ever decided to see it as something other than a threat. We're not strong, she told me once, and she said it without any shame about it, this thing her whole galaxy looked down on her kind for. Not compared to half the species out here. We figured out a long time ago we weren't going to win by being the scariest thing in the room, so we got good at the other thing, at making the scary things decide they didn't have to be scary anymore. Turns out that's a kind of strength too, just nobody counts it. I thought she was telling me a philosophy. I did not understand yet that she was telling me what was about to save all of our lives. Because 3 nights later, the containment failed. Part 3. It started with the cold. The dome's climate system had run without fault for longer than I had been alive, that eternal cold damp that kept the big one slow. But systems are systems, and that night something deep in it gave out, and the temperature in the halls began to climb. Slowly at first, then fast. A warm beast is a strong beast. That was the whole reason we kept them cold. And as the heat crept up through Hall 3, the apex predators we had collared and starved into stillness began, for the first time in cycles, to feel their full strength wake up in their bodies. The quiet one felt it first. I was on shift up on the catwalk when the alarms went. I will not pretend the next part is clear in my memory. It is mostly noise and red light. The quiet one had tested its enclosure seal, found it weakened by the heat stress and the failing power, and it had done what 4 cycles of captivity had taught it to never bother trying, because trying only brought pain. With the collar's charge guttering in the brownout, with the cold no longer holding it down, it pushed. And the seal that had held it for 4 cycles split open. It was free in Hall 3, and Hall 3 held every deadly thing we had. What happened next was the thing every keeper has nightmares about. With the main power failing, the other seals began to weaken too, one by one, the brownout chewing through systems that had never once been tested all at the same moment. The Wrenclaw, the pack hunter, the eyeless ocean thing thrashing in its tank as the baffles lost power and the whole hall's noise flooded in on it at once. And the human night keeper was down there, alone, in the dark, with the alarms screaming, with the deadliest creatures in the galaxy waking up all around her. The facility's response was fast, and it was the only response we knew. The broker called in the containment squad. Galactic security, the kind you keep on retainer for exactly this. A full squad of armored troopers from a heavy worlder military species, the sort of soldiers who put down breaches for a living. They came in through the emergency airlock with pulse rifles charged and shields up, and their orders were the orders that breaches always end with. Anything loose, you kill it. You do not contain a 4-kill apex predator in a brownout. You burn it down where it stands, and you write the loss off the ledger. They moved into the corridor outside Hall 3 in a wall of armor and weapons, and they were going to go in, and they were going to kill everything that moved. And Cora Vance was in there with everything that moved. I got to the corridor the same time the squad reached the inner door. I came down a maintenance shaft so fast I tore skin off my hands and I did not feel it. I do not know what I thought I could do. I am a small gray thing, but I could not be up on the catwalk for this. Not for her. The squad leader had her hand on the door release, and through the observation panel, in the red emergency light, we could all see into Hall 3, and what we saw stopped the squad leader's hand before she pressed it. Cora Vance was standing in the open, in the middle of the hall in the red light, with the gates blown and the collars dead and the deadliest creatures in the galaxy loose all around her. And they had not touched her. The Renclaw was out, that armored mountain free for the first time in cycles, and it stood between Cora and the far wall, and it had not charged. The pack hunter prowled the shadows at the edge of the light, second mouth working, and it circled but it did not close. And the quiet one, the 4-kill apex, the thing the squad had come to kill, stood directly behind Cora Vance, unfolded to its full impossible height, looming over her small clay-brown figure in the dark. It was not attacking her. It was standing over her, the way you stand over something you have decided to protect. The squad leader spoke into her calm, flat and certain. Specimens loose, handler compromised, going in hot. And Cora's voice came back over the hall's failing intercom, calm, even the same voice she used to talk to the Renclaw, and she said, Don't come in, don't fire. You fire in here and you turn all of them at once and then everyone dies, including your squad. Give me 5 minutes. They're not breaking out, look at them. They're not even trying to reach the door. I looked, she was right. The gates were open. The way to the corridor to escape to the surface was clear. Any one of those creatures could have made for it, and not one of them was. They were not trying to escape. The Renclaw stood guard. The pack hunter circled close to her. The quiet one loomed over her like a roof. They were not breaking out of the hall. They were gathering around the one being who had never hurt them. The squad leader hesitated. I have thought a great deal about that hesitation since, because it is the hinge that everything turned on. She was a soldier. Her orders were clear. Every instinct her training had given her said open the door and fire. And something in the sight of that small human standing unharmed and unafraid beneath the protection of the galaxy's deadliest beast made her wait. Just long enough. 3 minutes, the squad leader said. Then we burn it. I watched Cora Vance work. I will see it until I die. She did not hum this time. There was too much fear in the hall for that, not her fear, theirs. The panic of huge animals feeling their strength return all at once with no idea what to do with it. So she gave them something else. She gave them her. She walked, slow, open-handed, between them. She went to the Renclaw first and put her hand on its armored flank, and that siege weapon of a creature shuddered and lowered itself to the floor at her touch. She went to the pack hunter, the one with the second mouth that had never let anyone near, and she crouched and let it come to her, and it pushed its terrible head against her shoulder like a frightened thing, which is all it had ever been. She went to the eyeless ocean thing thrashing in its failing tank, and she pressed both her hands flat to the glass over its heartline, and it felt her slow, steady human heart through the water and the glass, and it stilled. One by one, in 3 minutes, with no prod and no collar and no remote and no weapon, this soft, small, fragile member of the species the whole galaxy called weak, she calmed every deadly creature in that hall. She did the thing none of us, with all our brutal science, had ever been able to do. She made them feel safe, and a creature that feels safe does not need to be a monster. The quiet one was last. She walked back to where it stood guard over the empty middle of the hall, and she looked up at it the way she had that first night, and the quiet one lowered its featureless head down to her, careful, so careful, and she pressed her open palm to the side of that great dark skull, and it leaned into her hand. 4 kills. Every one of them earned in pain, and it leaned into her open hand like the prisoner it had always been, finally finding the one keeper who had come without a key and without a whip. When the climate system came back online, hours later, and the cold settled back into the halls, the squad leader and her troopers had long since stood down. They had watched the whole thing through the panel. They walked out of that facility, I was told, and not one of them spoke. There is nothing for a soldier to say when the thing they came to kill turns out to have been protecting the only person in the room who ever treated it like a being. The breach went into the ledger as contained. No losses. In 60 cycles, that had never once happened. A full apex breach in a brownout and not a single death, not a beast and not a keeper and not a soldier. The broker tried to make it a story about the failed climate system after that, about better seals and redundant power. He did not want it to be a story about Cora Vance because that story had a cost he could not afford. That story meant we had been wrong, all of us, for generations. That story meant the deadliest beasts in the galaxy were not deadly at all, that they had only ever been frightened and hurt and waiting all that time for someone to walk in with open hands. But the keepers knew, the keepers had seen. I put down my prod the next day. I never picked it up again. I am old and I move slow now, but I walk hall 3 with open hands like she taught me, and the Renclo rises to greet me, and I am not afraid and neither is it. Most of the others came around in time. Some never did. Some need their monsters too much to let them go. Cora Vance stayed with us another year, and then she moved on, the way her kind do, off to some other dark place full of frightening things that no one had ever decided to see properly. She did not make a speech when she left. She just packed her one bag, the same one she had come with, and she shook my small gray hand, and she told me the thing I have carried ever since. They were never the monsters, she said. We just needed something to be afraid of, so we made them. The galaxy's full of deadly things. Almost none of them started out that way. And then she was gone, off to teach the next frightening thing that it did not have to be. I have fed monsters for 60 cycles of my life. I buried more keepers than I can count killed, we always said, by the deadliest beasts in the galaxy. But I think now we had it backward the whole time. I do not think those creatures were ever the deadliest thing in that facility. I think the deadliest thing was us, and our fear, and the science we built on it. And the bravest thing I ever saw was a small soft human who walked into the dark with empty hands and refused, simply refused, to be afraid of anything that had only ever been afraid of us.